Hi, folks. I'm Joe Bebon, editor of Trade Publication Facilities Management Advisor, and I'm here with CJ Calavito, general manager of integrated project teams at Standard Solar. Today, we're going to discuss the basics of solar energy for facilities, including top benefits and challenges. Thanks for joining us, CJ.
That's my pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's get going. So, first off, why should facilities managers consider going solar at their facilities today? What are some key benefits to the organization?
I think why a lot of people start looking at solar is because they see it as a sustainability measure to meet sustainability goals. But
Mhm.
the why people actually execute on solar energy systems on site are often because they see real savings and that's accretive to their business.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, certainly, you know, people will say, "Hey, it looks great. We're going green," but at the same time, actually helps the bottom line. Uh, Especially with sustainability initiatives, ESG, going net zero, all that stuff. Is there any other one regarding, does it help with power outages or resilience at all?
That's a great question. I think the answer has comes with caveats.
Hmm.
It could be yes, but it might be no. So just a straight solar energy system installed on your roof or in your parking lot or in a field next to the facility without energy storage would not typically provide any resiliency or backup power. But if you have an energy storage system and that energy storage system is designed to have an automated transfer switch and backup power to critical circuits or even potentially the entire facility or plant, then yes, it can certainly be a valuable component in a resiliency system. But when the key thing to understand is for grid tied or net metered solar energy systems, they are designed to run in parallel with the grid. And when the grid is down, then you isolate as well automatically so that it's not feeding power back into a faulted circuit on the grid or causing some sort of safety issue for a grid service technician or for the utility and potentially damaging equipment in the process. So, grid tied solar energy systems are designed to meet anti islanding requirements, which means it cannot be creating its own power island when the rest of the grid is down, unless you design it intentionally for that, which means you have to have an automatic transfer switch to pull your system off of the grid, and then you can run with solar and energy storage.
There's always got to be a nuance and technical stuff behind it.
Oh, yes.
Um, yeah. I mean, yeah, one of the main questions or concerns with solar is like, what happens when the sun doesn't shine, sort of deal. So, at nighttime, obviously, solar is not going to help you unless you have the energy storage aspect,
Well, I
which,
think it's important to clarify that when you have a
yeah.
grid-tied solar energy system that's designed to supplement your power needs, it's primarily there to offset your energy usage and reduce your energy bill so that
Mhm.
you're consuming less from the grid, but it runs in parallel with your utility. So as the user, you should not be able to feel or perceive the difference between your solar energy system delivering power to the facility or the grid delivering power to the facility. They run seamlessly in parallel with one another, and the solar PV system is simply offsetting what would have been consumed. So at nighttime, you're just drawing in from the grid instead of producing from your solar energy system. And where you'd see it most is the meter itself may be displaying something different, but otherwise it would be imperceptible to the users on site, whether it's coming from the solar PV system or from the grid.
Cool. Great clarification. Thank you. All right. So, what are facilities managers' solar options? Can you please briefly explain the types of projects available?
Yeah, I think that the way I would classify it is in system types or how do we mount it? Do we put it on the roof? You put it in a parking lot as a parking canopy system that provides some shade and potential vehicle or asset protection as well? Or do you put it in an open field where you can get the highest producing type of PV system that may be the lowest cost and best productivity, but it requires you to have open area? So for most facilities, whether it's factories or retail or office. It's all about where do you have space available for the solar energy facility? Is it on the roof? Do you have a large roof with limited obstructions and open space to deploy a PV system? Is your roof in good condition, not too old, because we're about to put a solar energy system on the roof that has a service life of 25 to 35 years. So you don't want to have a roof that's near the end of its service life, because you would end up having to remove and replace. So oftentimes we really try to synchronize the solar energy system deployment on rooftops with a roof replacement or a new building construction. Parking lots are a great option when you have no other solutions, because they're the most expensive, but they also provide a lot of ancillary benefits. In the southwestern United States, it's very common because parking canopies are often used even without solar, because it's so hot and there's so much direct sun, and a lot of folks like to keep their vehicles and other assets out of that direct sun. It can provide some protection from the elements as well, and a lot of folks enjoy parking underneath solar canopy systems. But they are the most expensive. They use a lot more steel. The foundations are typically a 3-foot diameter, 10-foot deep concrete caisson type of foundation with rebar in there. So it's more expensive than other types. But there are some ancillary benefits. So in certain markets, a parking canopy can still provide good returns for the host or the user, but oftentimes they are cost prohibitive in a lot of markets where you're seeing break even in the investment middle point. Ground mounts, where you could have either a fixed tilt system or a single axis tracker where you actually follow the sun when it rises in the east until it sets in the west, are the lowest cost and highest producing, typically, type of solar energy system, but it requires a fair amount of land available. A rule of thumb for commercial systems is you need about 4 acres for each megawatt of solar energy that you're about to deploy. And typical facilities, you're going to see small systems in the 500 kilowatt range, and all the way upwards to beyond 10 megawatts in scale. So if you're able to be hosting a solar energy system that's 10 megawatts in scale, and you can use that energy, give you an excellent investment with great value in return.
Great. I mean, I feel like we kind of covered, different ways to determine what works best for you. Essentially, how much space do you got, as well as any other, you know, factors that might come into that decision.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about systems co-located at the facility, space is the first assessment. And then you're looking at, well, what is the grid infrastructure at the site? But if you're already operating in a facility and it's using significant energy, the assumption is pretty good that there's a robust electrical infrastructure in the area for you to interconnect to with the solar energy system. Then the next piece is the project going to be able to provide good returns? Are you going to be able to deliver savings through a power purchase agreement so that you can save on your energy rate? Or will you get good returns if you invest in that directly as a cash deal or through a loan program? And that is often driven by state and local incentives. Everywhere in the US, everyone's eligible for the federal investment tax credit, which, depending on a number of complicated adders that can be weaved into the investment tax credit for location and type of use of the system, and you can get anywhere between 30% investment tax credit all the way up to 50 plus. But for typical, I would assume it's going to be 30 for facilities managers, unless you're in a adjacent to a coal closure facility, and then you'll have some adders in there. But a lot of states offer really good incentives, and it really depends on your facility and where it's located and the utility territory and what types of policies and incentives may be applicable in your area.
As mentioned, always got to be nuances. So yeah, I mean, we're talking, possible financing options. You said Standard Solar, they offer what's called a power purchase agreement. I was wondering if you could kind of just explain what that is and how that works.
Yeah, so a power purchase agreement is typically where we would sign an agreement with an energy offtaker, and often in this case, the user of the energy is also the host of the solar energy system. And they agree to a fixed rate for the electricity. They agree to buy all the electricity generated by the system over usually a relatively long term, between 20 and 28 years. And there's a base rate with an escalator typically that increases year over year, and let's call it a 2% range. And that base rate is usually set at a discount from the user's all-in wholesale electricity rate. And you can achieve savings from your electricity bill on day one from that when that solar energy system turns on with zero investment, because the third party owner, in this case hopefully Standard Solar, um, invests and finances that system. We design and build it, and we own it and operate it, and the host and energy user simply agrees to pay for all of the energy generated by the system, which should be a savings and contribute to sustainability goals often as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that's one great option, and then as I always say, it's kind of like a car. You could also own or lease a solar installation as well. And a lease is kind of similar to PPA, I'd say, in that there's no upfront costs or maintenance required, but of course you don't own it. As far as ownership goes, you get to keep all the tax and savings benefits, but higher upfront costs potentially, and you kind of got to worry about maintenance on your own end. Um, any other options or anything else you
Yeah,
like?
there are some other approaches. You could do commercial property assessed clean energy, where they finance the cost of the system on the property tax bill. That's available in limited areas. So it's definitely something to look at if it's available in your area. It could be a really effective approach. I would say for all cases, whether it's a cash deal that you're self financing, you're doing a power purchase agreement, or a lease, I would recommend that hosts and energy users avoid being the owner and operator of their system. Even if they own it, they should make sure they're engaged with a professional operations and maintenance company, and you sign an agreement and a contract with that, because it's important to ensure the system is operating and performs as expected, or you're not going to get the savings.
Yeah,
Systems that aren't producing electricity don't provide value to the user, and they should operate very autonomously for long periods of time with little to no intervention. But you need to make sure that somebody is paying attention to it, so when something does happen, it can be corrected quickly and get the system up to full operating capacity and deliver the value that is expected.
gotcha. Yeah, if it's not working, you're not getting any benefits. Makes sense.
Exactly. And that's
Um,
why some of these third party ownership models are very nicely aligned with a host, because the user of the electricity doesn't save money unless electricity is produced, and the owner of the system doesn't make money unless we produce electricity. So the interests are aligned to keep the system operating efficiently and effectively.
Gotcha. Just to clarify, you mentioned potential incentives and stuff. You said the federal ITC investment tax credit. If someone were to do a PPA or at least per se, the who gets that incentive? Would it be the third party provider? How does that work?
Yeah, so we would roll in all the benefits and grants, renewable energy credit values, and incentives into the net power purchase agreement rate. So we use all of that to deliver the best value to the customer and make sure that there is savings for the customer and also a return for the long-term owner. Um, States where we see a lot of benefits with good incentives really include Illinois, Massachusetts, New York, Maryland, New Jersey, California, and Washington, D.C. are to name a few.
Great. This one wasn't on the list of questions, but I think I'm remembering correctly. Didn't you folks at Standard Solar do a major project with Washington D.C. to like help them meet their sustainability goals?
Yeah, we did. We recently commissioned a 7.5 megawatt solar energy system. It's actually a community solar system at the Catholic University of America. And Catholic University, I believe, if I recall, subscribes to about 20% of the energy output of that system. And the balance goes to mostly residential subscribers throughout the district, all who save on their energy from what they would purchase at retail from the utility provider, which is an important point to note, that if you can't host a system because you either don't have the space, maybe your roof is the only place you can do it, but your roof is halfway through its service life, so you don't want to replace it. and you don't want to put a solar energy system on there. Maybe the parking canopy solution, there's sufficient space, but it's too expensive. In many states, I want to say on the order of a dozen plus states in the United States, there are community solar programs, or there are virtual metering or remote metering programs where you can build a large scale system off-site or remote from the user, and then receive credits for the energy as if it were on your own roof or behind your own meter by subscribing to the energy or signing an agreement to purchase the energy from that system. Typically, it requires it to be located in the same utility service territory. And like I said, it's a state level policy that allows this, but it can be an excellent alternative and oftentimes can provide more savings or a lower cost value of energy to the user because you're able to build a system that's potentially in a more ideal orientation and location, potentially a better piece of land, and potentially even larger than you would be able to host locally. So community solar, remote or virtual metered solar is an excellent option for facilities owners if they're focused primarily on savings and having a system on site, particularly for resiliency. If that's not an important feature, then a remote system can serve well. But of course, a remote system cannot service resiliency because you're not co-located with the load.
Yeah. All right, so we'll add community solar as another option there, depending upon where you live, obviously. Uh, I feel like we've covered some challenges already, what space do you got and everything, but I was just wondering, any other top challenges to adopting solar that might be noteworthy?
Yeah, I think for a lot of facilities, the first thing people look at are roofs. And I mentioned that the roof age and condition is important, but also the structural capacity of the roof matters and depends on the snow load in the area where the facility is, and the roof structure. If it can't support the load, then of course that wouldn't be a viable solution. Um, you could also have some challenges if you're doing a ground mount or a carport, if the soils are very rocky or if there's a high water table. They can create some construction challenges, but they're primarily surmountable. Just typically increases some of the cost and may reduce the impact of savings somewhat. Permitting typically has been a pretty complicated process in most jurisdictions throughout the US for solar PV. But if you are co-located with a facility and your system is designed to be an accessory use rather than a remotely located or community solar facility, permitting is generally more straightforward because it is not permitting for a primary use and it's typically already zoned in an industrial zone. So permitting may or may not be a challenge, and interconnection certainly needs to be accounted for. Every system needs to obtain permission from the local utility to interconnect and generate electricity, which it injects into the grid. And the utilities will have an application process, and they usually go through an interconnection study review, and often will have some interconnection upgrade costs associated with the project, depending on the capability of the local electric distribution system infrastructure to absorb the energy from the solar PV system. Not to push people off, but interconnection and permitting in some cases can take anywhere from 6 to 24 months, depending on the complexity of the project.
Wow.
So it is an important step, and it is critical to get moving and have folks who are very familiar with the process in order to navigate it successfully.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of red tape regarding any type of major construction or something. A facility's most likely going to need, a bigger project than, say, someone's home, right? So, it's not going to be
Definitely.
an overnight installation by any means, right?
Absolutely. Installation, I would say, is typically 6 to 9 months of physical construction in the field, depending on the complexity and size of the solar energy system.
Great. And I think you mentioned it earlier, but just to verify, how long does the system last? How long could you expect these potential savings?
I would say you expect savings that can really depend on the location, the type of project, and the scale.
Hmm.
and that also can affect when those come in.
Okay. Um, but certainly on the years long, I'm assuming.
Yeah, you should expect to see savings to the entire service life of the system.
Gotcha.
Um, Oftentimes we see folks see the gap between retail rate and their solar energy cost rate expand over time. In rare cases, you'll see a dip in the rates, but that tends to be temporary because over the very long term, you see a trending upwards of electricity rates in the 2 to 4% range, depending on where you are in the country and the utility territory you're in. But it's very rare that a customer would see their fixed power purchase agreement rate end up being higher than the utility service rate over the long term. I'm not sure that I have actually observed that yet.
Hmm. I guess accidentally asked that a little bit incorrectly. Not savings per se, just overall in general, like how long a solar system typically lasts, its lifetime, things like that.
Yeah, I would say it's between 25 and 35 years. When
Okay.
Standard Solar finances projects, we design for a 35-year service life,
Oh,
and we model returns on investment based on a 35-year operational life of the solar energy system.
great. Yeah. Again, I misspoke. Not like guaranteed savings for 30 years or anything to that effect, but um, yeah. I mean, there's so many different dynamics.
But that
What?
being said, with that long horizon, it provides a very stable energy hedge against what's happening in energy markets and some volatility.
Yeah, I mean, notably, as I'm sure everybody at their facilities and their homes, across the country, electricity prices are skyrocketing. I just got a pretty scary bill myself the other day, so something to consider. One other thing I meant to mention, you kept mentioning solar PV, and because this is solar 101, essentially, could you just tell our audience what that means, the PV
Yeah,
aspect?
PV stands for photovoltaics, and that's because solar panels run off of the photovoltaic effect, which is where they respond to sunlight to create electricity. So in our industry, we say PV all the time rather than saying photovoltaic, but that is in essence the most common type of solar electricity generated in the US and probably globally.
Great. Yeah, I mean it is a mouthful, so you always need the nice little acronyms. Um, all right, so let's say we established, facilities managers want to work with somebody. What questions should a facilities manager ask a solar vendor before inking a contract?
This is a significant project and investment, even if you're not the one directly investing in it, because it's a commitment for 20 to 28 years. So I'm sure folks already know this, but I recommend getting bids from a few providers unless you have a very strong relationship. For folks who are doing the construction on their own sites, you definitely want to be more aware of that provider's track record. Want to check some references, want to understand their statement of qualifications and their history of delivering projects successfully. For offsite systems, it's far less of a concern for the energy user, the means and methods of construction, and there's just a lot less risk if it's offsite. So that's an opportunity to consider community solar remote metered systems if your facility is particularly sensitive, for example, data centers or secure facilities. Potentially, an offsite solar energy system could be a low cost, low risk way to go. But if you have the space, then you provide more options if you can have it on site because there can be some demand charge reduction benefits, especially if coupled with energy storage and resiliency benefits, as we discussed, if that's a goal of the energy user.
Great. All right, so let's assume anybody who just watches this, facility managers are sold on solar now, but budgets and everything are tight, and they still need their bosses to sign off on it. So I always like to ask, what's a good quick elevator pitch for them to get the buy-in from their higher ups?
what would you say to zero investment, savings on day one, and you're also uh, contributing to your sustainability goals and carbon neutrality goals or ESG goals in your company? It's a great marketing opportunity for corporations that see this as an important piece of their business model and their customer base. And with third party ownership, there's zero cost upfront, zero investment from the host. So, how could you say no to guaranteed energy savings and no cost upfront while also contributing to your sustainability goals? If if it works in your area and territory or your facility, I'm surprised it hasn't been done already.
Well, all right. Well, sounds like that might be a pretty good case for them to make. Before we wrap things up, just always in general, anything else you might like to add?
I would say that if you have any questions or you are thinking about this, um, reach out to providers in your area. Standard Solar is national, and we're happy to support all. So visit standardsolar.com and reach out to us. We'd be happy to provide a bid or even answer questions and help folks understand what's appropriate for them, even if it's not a fit for your facility or if your project is not within our parameters for investment. We'd be happy to provide some consultation and references for folks that can service you as a business. But putting hosting solar on site or being an offtake customer for remotely located solar is a great way to deliver value to your corporation through both savings and sustainability goals. And it's becoming extremely common. And if it's a good solution economically in your area, it's definitely something you should consider in the near term.
Mhm.
One thing I hear often is folks say, this technology is improving and getting better all the time. Why should I do it now? I might be able to do better later. My answer to that is electricity costs are what they are. And if you can supplement those with clean electricity at a discount, then every day you wait is a day you're not getting those savings.
Mhm.
It's not really about the technology. The technology allows us to develop more projects that weren't economically viable previously or in areas where they weren't technically capable, but it doesn't change the fact that we're able to deliver savings to customers. So as soon as savings make sense for you, you should be moving forward with your facility.
Great. And I wouldn't be doing my job unless I had to point out that, Stern Solar, you folks, this isn't sponsored content or anything. And, welcome our audience to, explore, the internet exists. You can look up other vendors and stuff if need be. But ultimately, I think the message is, solar can make sense for you, and, to explore the option. So sounds great to
Definitely.
me. Yeah. All right. Well, again, CJ, thank you very much for taking time to speak with us and give a little lowdown on solar, and hopefully people will start considering it a little bit more.
That would be great. Thank
All
you,
right.
Joe.